And good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for this edition of What Are You Reading? This will be a bit of a change. So we are our last video for a little while. We're going to switch to like a quarterly type of schedule as we're doing a lot of our virtual programs that you may have seen in our program guide. But we'll still be here. We'll be back here in the winter to talk about some winter books and some other things. But here we are. We're here today to talk about our September choices of things we've read recently, what our librarians here have enjoyed, maybe what they haven't. And we're also always excited to hear what you at home are reading. So if you're reading something, let us know. Leave a comment, whether you're watching with us on our website or Facebook or YouTube. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the books we talk about or what books you're reading and what you suggest. And we'd love to comment on those. All right. How are the three of you doing today?
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right.
Great day.
All right. We can go ahead and get started. We'll just dive right in. We'll start at the top here. Nancy, what do you want to talk about first?
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit old school. Our book club read just a really nice summer book, and there's a second book we can talk about too. There are two. The first book is called Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. So if you're looking for a nice set of stories, Kristen Hanna is a good bet. She writes just really nice stories about family and friendship, and this one was particularly good. It's also a Netflix series if you want to check that out on Netflix, and I'm going to start watching it on Netflix, and I'm curious to know if it covers the second book as well. I'm not sure. It's kind of nice because it starts out in 1974, and it's about a friendship between two girls who are in middle school, and it follows them all the way through their entire lives. And one thing about this story that I really like is it talks about the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and what's going on in each period. And so you've got the bell bottoms and hippies, and it's just a really nice story, but it centers on the friendship between two girls, and one is very driven and very motivated. She comes from a poor family life, and she kind of becomes friends with this other girl who lives across the street, and she even ends up living with that family for a period because her mother is very unstable, addicted to drugs, and she's a hippie. So Tully gets a lot out of being friends with Kate and identifying with her family. So, it's a story, and it goes through 30 years of both women, and I don't want to tell too much because some things happen and wouldn't want to give spoilers, but it's just a very nice summertime read if you're looking for one last summer book, Firefly Lane. And then the second book is called Fly Away. It's a really nice story.
I feel like it would make for a great book club book as it covers so much time. I'm sure you can have a lot of people talk about, their different memories in these different time periods. How did your book club like the book?
Yes, our book club loved it. We had a lot of discussion. There were some secondary characters in there. Kate got married through the story, so we were interested in her husband and the effect that the marriage had on the friendship between the two girls, or between the two women. And Kate also has children, and Tully is very career oriented, so she chooses that route and becomes famous. So there was a lot of good discussion.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Nancy. All right, Chris, what is your first book here today?
So I'm going to kind of deviate from the norm and talk about The Firekeeper's Daughter for a minute or two. I don't know if you have the artwork for it, so I brought the Michigan Reads.
Of two books that we were talking about today, where like the cover really drew me in. It was so I don't know. It's so amazing looking.
Yeah, isn't it though? So this is the Michigan Humanities presents the Great Michigan Read, and the Great Michigan Read program is where the Library of Michigan works with libraries around the state to get people to read the same book and then do programming around it. And I think for GDL, we got a few sets of the books to give away for free to our patrons. My book club will be reading it, and my online book club that I host is also going to be reading it. So we will be talking about this book a lot in the next couple months. It takes place in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, which for me is really exciting. I started the book the other day because as she describes Sault Ste. Marie, I was just there in August, and so I'm recognizing a lot of the landmarks that she talks about, the main strip, the locks. It's really kind of cool. I'm about 75 pages in so far. She is Native American, so there's a lot of language terminology that is Native language. I don't remember if it's Ojibwe, it's Ashen. I'm not even going to say it correctly. And please forgive me for not being able to say it because I don't know what it is, but a lot of references to that, some discussion so far about being part Native American and part French. And I think it's going to be really great. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm really excited about talking about some of the things that are in the book discussion guide that the Michigan Humanities put out. And anyway, if you're interested in this book and you want to join one of the book clubs, let me know. Otherwise, look for the bag of books that we'll be putting together for people to request to use for their book clubs. No sound.
There we go. I was just saying that if you are seeing this and you do want to learn more or get a bag of books or don't know how to do that, you can leave a comment here and we'll point you in the right direction. Who you need to talk to do that. All right. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Nancy.
Also, I read this book a couple years ago, and the new sequel to the book is out this year. It's called Warrior Girl Unearthed. So if you like that book, our book club is doing that also for the month of September. And also we got a handout that says from September 20th to October 8th, you can get a free digital or audio copy if you follow the link. So we do have that information if you call one of us.
That's cool. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Chris. All right, Sherry, what do you want to talk about first?
My first book is Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. And I had to write the title down because I can never remember which order it goes in. It's just a long title. But Mika Moon is a witch, and she feels pretty isolated. According to Primrose, who's the witch who raised her, witches shouldn't gather together lest they be noticed. So this leads to a pretty lonely life for Mika, moving around England. She never stays in the same place for very long. But after posting some videos of herself doing witchcraft online, which most people just attribute to being special effects and not her being an actual witch, she gains the notice of Lucy, Ian, Ken, and Jamie, and they're tasked with raising 3 young witches. So they convince Mika into coming to Nowhere House to teach these young girls about their powers. So Mika heads out that way, decides to take the job, and then is tasked with raising these 3 witches. So Mika doesn't expect to find her found family at Nowhere House, but these people worm their way into her heart. But then she's worried that maybe they're hiding something. So this book gave me kind of House in the Cerulean Sea kind of vibes, and I think we've all read that one and really liked it. I really liked the grumpy sunshine kind of relationship between Mika and Jamie, who is like the librarian in the house. Ian was just an absolute hoot. I think he's my favorite character in the whole book. And I feel like this book would be best read wrapped up in a blanket on your couch with a warm cup of tea. It's just like a hug in a book.
I was going to say, just from the artwork, the cover, it reminded me of House on Cerulean Sea that you talked about.
It does.
That's funny that you mentioned it. What's your favorite part, or the favorite thing you can share without sharing too much? What do you think would appeal to most people?
I kind of think the three young girls. I mean, Ian is hilarious, but the three young witches each have their own specific personality and their own way of interacting with Mika and the other adults. And so you've got, the one who really loves her from the beginning and the one who tries to sabotage her at every moment just to make a point. So they're a lot of fun.
That sounds like it. All right. Thank you, Sherry. Let's go back to Chris really quick. Chris, what is your next book you want to talk about?
I'm going to talk about Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This one, I think, came out in August. It hasn't been out very long. So this story is set in the spring of 2020 in a northern Michigan orchard. Lara and her husband and three daughters share the duties of running a cherry orchard during the heart of the pandemic. I do want to tell readers to please note that the pandemic is barely a footnote in the story. She refers to it occasionally here and there, but it is not like the overriding theme of the story. So the girls ask their mom to tell a story of her time as an actress at the niche summer theater troupe called Tom Lake, which is also located in northern Michigan, about an hour and a half north of Traverse City. It is fictional. I believe Tom Lake is fictional, though I often wondered if maybe the reference was to Interlaken, but I wasn't sure and I didn't research it. But so Lara had a romance with a pre-famous actor during her time at the summer theater, and she recounts her time there with him back to her daughters. So of course the daughters are grown and they have lots of questions. They want to know all about this relationship she had with this now famous actor. And, they make assumptions about her life and some of the decisions she made before she had children. And so there's a lot going on in the story so it takes place in this theater, right? And so there's a lot going on between the play characters in the theater troupe, the real-time characters in the story, and then some of the characters in Tom Lake share the same name as the characters in real time. So it was a little bit confusing for me in the beginning. I kept having to be like, now what? So the other kind of disconcerting thing was that it wasn't always clear when the author was changing time periods. So here you have this confusion with the names. You have a little bit of confusion with what time period we're talking about. Are we back in time with the famous actor? Or are we in present time? But eventually I got used to it. And overall, I enjoyed Lara's storytelling of that time period in Tom Lake. And I absolutely loved the setting in northern Michigan. It rang true. It felt authentic. So I really liked the book.
I had recently read a novel, Lucy by the Sea, which is all kind of about COVID and the pandemic, and like a story that tells a story that could only really take place during that time. Is that kind of how they use COVID there? Is kind of like a reference point for certain parts?
Yes, I would agree. Because she had to make the story work where her adult daughters could be living back at home with her. And I think she used the pandemic as a way to allow that to happen.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Nancy, what do you have next?
All righty. I read kind of a creepy one. Early for Halloween. This is a nonfiction book called All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. And Haley is a journalist. She's searching for answers in the people who make a living by working with the dead. This says a deeply compelling exploration of the death industry and the people, morticians, detectives, crime scene cleaners, embalmers, and executioners who work in it and what led them there. So it starts out talking about the history of cadavers and that history starts with the grave robbers and the doctors who wanted to study the dead in their homes. They were so fascinated in trying to unlock all the secrets of the human body. So they ended up using grave diggers or grave robbers. And then people in Victorian times started donating their body, and there was a big campaign to donate your body, and that became more popular. And then she takes it to what people actually do in the death industry. And I find this fascinating because I'm kind of morbidly curious. It's very scary to me. So maybe in reading books like this, we can break down some of the fear in death. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. And I've read a lot of books like this. I read about the death cleaners, the people who go in and clean up after crime scenes, and other books like that. And I think it's all kind of morbid, but kind of fascinating. So this is a very good one. And she's deeply affected by what she sees, and she talks about it all along the way, her own feelings and how she's processing it. So it was just a really good nonfiction read.
It's funny because before we got started, Nancy was talking about the gloomy weather outside, and I think about how much I kind of like it. But it seems like Nancy should really like the gloomy weather with some of the stories you like.
I know. I'm just fascinated by these odd books.
It sounds really interesting, though. Really neat. All right, thank you, Nancy. All right, Sherry, what's up for you next?
Square of Sevens by Laura Shepard Robinson. It takes place in Regency, England, which is not a time period I read a lot about, but it was pretty fascinating. So Red is the daughter of a cunning man, or basically what we would call today a con man, and a teller of fortunes. She's been told her mother died during childbirth. She's very young when the story begins, but she knows how to tell the square of sevens using cartomancy, which her father has taught her. I had to look it up because I thought they were talking about tarot cards, but it turns out they lay out different, like a square of sevens is what they call it, with actual playing cards, and they tell people's fortunes that way. But she becomes an orphan, and she's taken in by a wealthy gentleman in Bath, England, named Robert Antrobus. So he kind of becomes her legal guardian. And during the time frame where she's being raised, she becomes obsessed with finding out about her mother that she never knew. So she starts kind of snooping around. There had been a case that her father had left for her that she'd never been allowed to touch. The housekeeper of Mr. Antrobus had hidden it from her. So she finally gets a chance to look in that, and that kind of leads her on this wild adventure looking for her mother and her family. So this lead kind of takes her through the seedy carnivals of London, where her father grew up, and high society in Regency, England, where she thinks that her mother might have been from. The only thing she's ever been told is that her mother was disowned when she married Red's father. So there's a lot of characters. There's a lot going on, but this book is like one of my favorites of the year. The author stated that she wanted to write something mythical and magical, and she wanted it to be a sweeping story similar to Dickens with a twist. And I would say she succeeded because this does give a lot of like the Dickens kind of vibe to it. The plot's really intricate. And as I said before, there's numerous characters, but this book is so well written that I never got confused as to who was who or what was going on. There are some twists towards the end that you won't see coming. It's not necessarily a mystery book per se, but there's some things we don't know that kind of happen towards the end. And I think this one would be perfect if you liked the London Seance Society, or if you like watching Bridgerton. I think this one would be fun for you.
That's really compelling, Sherry. When you mentioned you had to look up cartomancy, I looked it up. I was looking it up as you were mentioning that, because because I was kind of curious, and that seems really interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it sounds hard.
I don't know. I feel like you've really sold me on this book. I'm kind of curious, and I might have to check it out now.
It was so
thank you.
good.
All right. Chris, what is your last book here for today?
My last book is West with Giraffes by Linda Rutledge. And this is a kind of a last minute fill-in book club book for us that we're going to discuss tomorrow. It is a fictional story based on the true story of two giraffes who made headlines in Depression era America. They survived a hurricane when they were being brought over to the United States, and they landed in New York City, and the story is about their journey west. So the main character, it's a fictionalized story of this. So the main character is Woody Nickel, and he tells the story of how he became the driver for the two giraffes as they were transported from the East Coast to the San Diego Zoo. Woody is oh my gosh, what do they call him? He's a child of the Dust Bowl. So the story includes both fictional characters like Woody and his love interest Red, and it also includes some real life characters like the San Diego Zoo director Belle Benchley. So that was kind of interesting to have these kind of real character, not real character blended together in the story. The author also uses little clips of newspapers of the story as it went across the country, kind of in between chapters. So while describing this book to a coworker, he jokingly asked me if I was reading The Grapes of Wrath, as it was very much kind of about the Dust Bowl. And I had to laugh because I was like, it definitely sounds that way, doesn't it? So there were a few good moments in the story. But for me, a lot of it was just ho-hum. I didn't find myself wanting to pick it up and just keep reading it. My book club members who've returned the book have all been like, oh, this was fantastic. I loved it. So I'm curious to find out tomorrow if there was anybody who was like me that thought it was a little bit ho-hum. I will say that about 3/4 of the way through the book, I felt like it had been written specifically to be a movie. I read a couple more pages and I'm like, Tom Hanks is the narrator. I can totally see this. So that being said, I recommend this to anybody who likes to read cross-country travelogues or to anybody who just loves to read about darling animals.
Or anybody who really likes Tom Hanks, maybe.
Maybe that.
That's really interesting. I wonder, I wonder how your book club's going to feel. It's interesting to hear your opinion before the book club to see how that matches up.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chris. All right. Sherry, what is our last book for today?
After Dark with Roxy Clark by Brooke Lauren Davis. It's teen fiction, and it hadn't really been on my radar, except for I was scrolling through Instagram, probably in the middle of the night, as one does, and came across one of my favorite authors who recommended this book. And the more I read about it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick this book up. So the Clark women are said to be cursed. Many of them have died tragic or mysterious deaths, and Roxy Clark is a member of that family. So instead of wallowing in what fate might have in store for her, she turns it into a lucrative ghost tour business. She lives in a small town in Indiana, and she has a ghost tour business, and she goes around to different places where family members have died. She's meticulous in her research. She spends a lot of time in the library and in archives looking up the stories. And she even dresses the part, usually dresses all in black. She does skull makeup during the ghost tours. This makes her a bit of an outcast at school. And her only real friend is Tristan, who is the boy who lives next door. One case she never talks about, though, on her ghost tour is the death of her sister's boyfriend, Colin, who was also Tristan's brother. Colin was found murdered in a cornfield, and the killer has never been caught. Her sister is at home. She'd had a scholarship to, I believe, Yale, and ended up not going. She's just consumed by her grief. She can barely get out of bed. And then all of a sudden, she becomes obsessed with solving the crime. And she's convinced that Tristan killed his brother. So this kind of puts Roxy right smack dab in the middle. She doesn't believe that Tristan could have killed his brother, but she's kind of glad that at least her sister has something to get her out of bed. So this one was kind of a mystery. I really liked Roxy Clark. I was kind of hoping there would be more books featuring her as a character because she is probably the best part of the book. It's perfect for like Halloween, spooky season. It's just a fun book. And I know we have it on Overdrive in both audio and book form. And I believe, I'm not sure if it's Fenton or Grand Blanc has an actual physical copy as well.
Ooh, I like the Overdrive plug. Let's see. Yeah, as a Halloween read, that sounds really good. This is one of the books too that caught my eye. The cover, I like just the use of the colors. It stands out, the red and white. Really good. So this was one of you really enjoyed it, Sherry?
I did, and it wouldn't have been on my radar at all. I'd never even heard of the book or the author. So I was kind of glad I was scrolling through Instagram in the middle of the night and came across it.
There you go. Hey, that works. All right. Well, those are all the books we are talking about here today. So when you are watching this later, or if you're watching it now and have a thought later, leave some comments for us. Let us know what you thought and what books you are reading. And we will be back here in a couple months with a lot more books to talk about. All right. Thank you, all three of you, for being here with us today. And we will sign off for now. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice